That day, I got charged with robbery third for stealing baby lotion. Like, it went from theft of property to robbery in about 30 seconds because any time you try to run from the loss prevention officers, they will make it a robbery charge. So the paper, wrote us up as the baby lotion bandits and the baby lotion thieves. Yeah.
Let's be honest about recovery.
The rewards, the challenges.
Let's talk about our failures. We are flawed people, after all.
Let's challenge the stigmas that weigh us down.
Because while most of us are looked at, few of us are seen.
Let's talk about addiction.
And how Christ overcomes our weaknesses.
Because we are loved.
Because we are loved.
Because we are loved.
We are loved.
We are
Because
loved.
we are loved. Hello, my name is Lyndsey Tillery, and this is my story. When I was 13 years old, I first got saved, and God filled me with the Holy Ghost when I was 14. He called me to preach when I was 15, and I began to answer that call when I was 16, but I also began to compromise. By the time I was 20 years old, I was in full-blown drug addiction, and most of my 20s were spent between going back and forth between the church, the streets, prisons, and jails. But in 2019, I got the opportunity to go to the Home of Grace, and that's when God radically changed my life.
Hey, and welcome back to Jesus Loves Addicts. I'm Kathryn. This is Paul. Today we're going to interview a friend of mine, Lyndsey Tillery. Lyndsey was born and raised in Enterprise, Alabama. She basically started running from God at a young age and compromising in several different areas. Lyndsey ended up in prison, different rehabs, running in and out of churches, and found herself in a faith-based program in 2019 where she turned her life over to the Lord, and He has radically changed it. And today she's going to tell us about that. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask you to start at the beginning and tell us your story.
All right. So I got saved when I was 13 years old. Like, I remember growing up as a kid and going to vacation Bible school and GAs on Wednesday nights, and I'd heard about Jesus, and I didn't even know what Psalms 52 was or Psalms 23 was whenever all the other kids would be quoting it. I was would hold my head down because I was I have no idea what this is. But at the age of 13, I started going to church with my best friend and her mom. And it was a Pentecostal church, never been to one before. And when we got there, they were going to the altar and praying. And that tripped me out because, I'd never seen anything like that before. But I kept going and I kept going. And I remember the message was preached on hell. And I was scared. And the youth pastor come and asked me, did I want to get saved? I've been going for a few months involved in singing and stuff. I loved the love that was there in the people. There was something, I was just drawn to be there. Well, I got saved. And then I remember being filled with the Holy Ghost when I was 14. And I remember at 15 how the Word of God just come alive in my heart. But during this season of my life, as much as Jesus was getting a hold of me, there were still things going on in my life behind closed doors. I grew up in a divided home, where my mom had married my stepfather, but my dad wasn't really in the picture. It was just, my dad and my mom just met one night at the bar, and, here I was 9 months later type thing. It's just one of those. Well, my step family, some of my cousins and stuff, there was a lot of sexual abuse that began to happen at a very young age when I was 3 years old. So that's when I first knew how to lie. Not really lie as much, but to hide. No one forced me to lie. But from the age of 3 until I was 15, this was a constant revolving door in my life of just the sexual abuse, and so by the time when I meet Jesus, when I'm 13, 14, 15, I have all of these things, but the church made me so happy, and I was and when the Word of God began to open up to me, and then when the Lord began to show me my gifts and begin to show me what I was called to do, I chased that. I chased after the Lord. I chased after church. I chased after, I remember when He called me to preach when I was 15, and I battled that for 8 months. I didn't tell a soul. I talked to the Lord. I have journals to this day where I wrote about it. But I remember when I did finally tell the church, I was 16 by this time, and the particular church I was going to, there was a split, or the church was not splitting yet, but the pastors were resigning. And so that night I spoke up. I was like, God has called me to preach. Well, then that week, they would call me and make fun of me. And they're like, are you going to preach tonight? Just didn't believe me, didn't believe that God had really did this and stuff. So a few months later, I'd moved to a different church, I'd moved on and sat under another ministry where they began to let me walk in what God had called me to do in children's church, and God just began to work in my life, and I was so sensitive to the Spirit. But at the same time, I began to hang out with my friends on the weekend, and my mom and my dad, or my stepdad, they paid me to stay home one weekend from a trip where they had went to Eufaula. Well, that weekend we got into the GPCs, which is cigarettes. I don't even know if they still make that brand.
These were your mamas?
Yeah. They were my mom's. And we got into the Lord Calvary. I hadn't never really drank before, maybe once or twice in my life through, and that began that level of compromise in my life, of one weekend I would go hang out one weekend, getting drunk, sneaking off, smoking cigarettes, listening to Usher and, stuff like that. And then I was.
Prior to that first use, was there, because that's an abrupt about face kind of, right? Here you are, you're marching along in what appears to be this, clearly a Christian home. You're feeling called to preach, and then
my home wasn't a Christian home.
It was not.
No, my mom believed in God. She just was not serving God. I went to church with my other family, and my stepfather, he believed in God, but they didn't serve him.
So was there addiction in your family? Because it's just interesting, right? We're moving along. We get to this weekend, and all of a sudden we try alcohol and cigarettes. And
it's over with.
There was addiction in my family. It was just very well hidden. And by the time I got older, my mom had kind of grew up, and, she had to move away. My stepfather, now my stepfather had mental health issues, but on top of that struggled with substance use disorder at times, but it was very well hidden. It wasn't something that was spoken about. It wasn't something that caused these dire consequences that you couldn't keep paying your bills type thing. I was very sheltered from that side of my family's lifestyle.
Yeah. Functional dysfunction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know or have any dealings with your biological father?
I did. He would be in and out the picture.
Okay.
I would go to his house some weekends, and I would feel like a stranger because I don't know these people. I had a stepmom, and I had some step siblings and stuff like that. And by the time I was 12, though, I wanted a relationship with my father so bad that I found him in the phone book, and I called him, and we did have a relationship through my teenage years. He bought my first few cars, and he would buy this, and he would always send me money, but I wanted that quality time, and it was just something he was incapable of giving me. So.
Did you have any siblings?
I have a half brother that is by my mom.
Okay.
And then I have a half sister that is by my dad, my biological dad. And then I have several stepbrothers, or I have several step siblings, but my sister Tanya, even though she's my stepsister, that's my sister.
Yeah.
That's been there through thick and thin. So,
did y'all live in the same home?
Growing up from the age of 3, probably, I don't remember how much longer. We did for a while, but then she took care of her handicapped grandmother in my teenage years, so she wasn't in the picture as much then.
Okay.
So you very courageously talk about the abuse you went through, right? And thank you for being so open. Because it's very intertwined with this spiritual march, I'm curious, was there ever a time you were angry at God or blamed God for that? Or was this just something that was always, God is my refuge and this is just sin in a fallen world? Did you always have that separation, or was there a time that you blamed him and got angry at him?
Oh, there was definitely a time later on when I got into addiction, because the abuse started happening at such a young age that almost I thought it was normal.
Yeah.
Not maybe that I thought it was normal, but it wasn't until I got older and some things were revealed. When I was I think I was 14 and my aunt walked in on this situation happening between me and my cousin, and it caused this wedge in my family, but it was never dealt with. It was dealt with in that moment, but then it was it should have been investigated.
Yes.
Like this has been happening, and it was with several different cousins. And then, for years I would just call it sexual abuse, but it really was incest. Like if you want to be raw and real with it, that was what was happening. But it wasn't until I got later into addiction that I began to blame God, because when I went to church, I found this love and this joy and this peace and this hope and this something I didn't have before. And this was before I learned anything about religion, or I learned how to walk or how to talk in the Lord. Like it was all about just, I need more of Him. I need more of Him. But then when I began to compromise, it began to get more distorted, and then we fall into that victim mentality as I'm getting older, and then I wake up one day and I realize life is not this white picket fence that I think that it's supposed to be, and I still don't have that white picket fence, but so I went through those years of blaming God, blaming people, blaming my mom. My mom actually was on her way to have an abortion with me, and she got halfway there and something told her to turn around. And she told me that when I was 17, and I wasn't upset with her. I was empowered.
Yeah.
I was like, God, there must be a call of God on my life. I was empowered at that time. But I will say a few years later, I used it against her because I was in addiction and I would do anything to hurt people, so.
You mentioned the victimization mentality. Do you think, because it's an interesting transition, right? Here you are, you're in the throes of the abuse, but pursuing God, and there's this kind of maybe unconscious separation of those two. Then when you start to use, you begin to get angry at God, and then you married that to this word victimization. Do you think that became kind of an excuse, a cloak to feed your addiction? Like at that point, was there a benefit to being a victim in regards to your addiction? Does that make sense?
It does. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'm not very sure. I just know that, like, when you asked how did I go from serving the Lord to like falling off the wagon so quickly, it was just curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity. Our parents are gone. Nobody's here. Nobody's going to know. Let's just try this.
Yeah.
Little did I know that this little fox was going to turn into a big fox and a bigger fox and a bigger fox.
Yeah.
And I had church members in my life. I had women of God in my life that at this time, they taught me how to pray. They taught me how to intercede and how really to seek God. But they also were trying to lead me to tell me, you can't go here. You can't hang out with these people. There are certain things as serving the Lord that you can't go, but I couldn't hear that at 16, 17.
Sure.
I then started to get a taste of that world, and a taste of that world just began to draw me even further into the world. And that's where the back and forth, do good for a little while, do bad for a little while, do good for a little while, do bad. And it become, I'm earning my way to salvation. So I will do good for a little while, do bad. Well, then I'll get it together, and I'm doing everything I can I'm praying right, I'm reading right, I'm witnessing, I'm preaching, I'm speaking, I'm doing all the things, I'm dressing a certain way, all of this self-righteousness. But I didn't know any better. I didn't know that this wasn't what I was supposed to do. Not that no one told me I didn't have to or I had to. It was just the enemy's way to deceive me from being able to receive the full love of God.
Yeah.
Because by this point, I had so much trauma from my childhood and then trying to serve Lord. And here I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing. Now I'm starting to give myself away on my own. Like when I was 17, like I, have sex for the first time and it's what I want to do type thing. But it really wasn't something that I wanted to do. And it's just the spiral of trying to be good enough, trying to earn it that I just,
Yeah, it becomes a wrestling match, right? It's kind of running a ledger. It has my good outweighed my bad, and where am I in the payment system? And it's not that at all. So you were really practicing religion, not experiencing relationship at that point. Would that be fair to say?
Once I started to slip away from the Lord, definitely.
Yeah.
Just follow all the rules.
Yeah.
So alcohol and cigarettes kind of are your entry here. Excuse me. And again, thank you for your courageous honesty here. And then promiscuity, which is oftentimes intricately linked to an addictive lifestyle, right? So So then where does it stay at those things, or does this grow? Do you begin to?
Well, at 17, I had got back. So let me back up just a little bit before I fell into this, just giving myself all the way away. I got a boyfriend in the church, I thought I was going to marry him, of course. Like, he was the love of my life when I was 17, that, this is the man of God for me. Because at this point I'm on the wagon, we're doing good. We're trucking along right now.
You're on the right side of the ledger.
Yeah. And we were together for like 4 or 5 months, and then he broke up with me. He's the only boy who's ever broke up with me, and it broke my heart. So my first little heartbreak, and then like a few months later is when I tried to smoke weed for the first time. And it was just curiosity. And honestly, it was an Easter Sunday. So clearly I did not understand the gospel, or addiction for that fact, and then it wasn't something I did all the time. It was like back and forth between the smoking, the drinking, the smoking weed. Like at this point, I smoked weed like once a year. But then I fell into, having sex. But that was like something that happened like once a year until I was 19.
Yeah.
And then when I was 19, and now I'm in a church scandal. I'm in an affair with my pastor's son at the time. He just, I don't know the word, lured me in a sense, and the deception, but I didn't know at 19 that I battled with lust. I didn't know till I'm in my 30s, I have this problem. I couldn't see that at such a young age, but that happened. And then, but at the same time, I was like in the youth ministry at the church, all of these things, I was still doing these things in the church. So I was struggling behind the scenes. But I didn't know how to tell people. I mean, there was a few people that I had told, but I didn't know what to do at this point, and then that all came out. And then at the age of 20, I was still trying to get back on the wagon. The wagon just keeps running me over, trying to get back right with the Lord, trying to do all the things, but at the same time, I have so much guilt and I have so much condemnation and so much shame that it just kept me spiraling back to just those small things. And then I started hanging out with this girl, and then it went from smoking a little bit of weed to 2 weeks later, snorting a little bit of cocaine, or actually snorting pills was the first thing that I did. I said, I never snort drugs. I'm never going to snort drugs. Well, here I am snorting pills. 2 weeks later, here I am snorting cocaine, feeling like I'm on top of the world, to 3 weeks later, seeing my pastor's brother walking down the street thinking I'm just picking him up to take him to the gas station, being a good person, Well, he's like, do y'all want to get high? And we're like, yeah, because at this point we don't have no drugs. So we're willing to do anything.
Right.
He's like, you want to smoke some crack? I was like, sure. My friend's like, no, that sent my dad to prison. But we ended up going to pick up some women walking down the road, took them to the store. They come back with like $40. And then we went somewhere else. And that day I smoked crack for the first time. Yeah. And the ladies didn't warn me, this is going to ruin your life. This is going to take you down roads that you never, ever could have dreamed or imagined, and that day was when the addiction really set in.
So crack was an immediate love affair for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Where was your mom during all this? Did she know anything? Did she ever ask anything?
At this point, no.
Okay.
But like when I went back to smoking weed, my mom was actually in the hospital. And I'm, hanging out with my friend at the beach instead of being at the hospital with my mom. This is at 20. At 20 is when everything really begins to unravel. At 20 is when I was like, okay, I'm done straddling the fence. I'm done trying to serve God in the world. I'm like, Jesus, I'm breaking up with you. So I took all my Jesus stuff off the walls. I put all my Bibles in the drawer. I put all my devotionals in the drawer. I was like, I'm done here.
So truly a conscious decision there.
Yeah.
Not subtle at all.
That point, it was not subtle.
Yeah.
That point, it was not. And because of that, like the torment in my mind now, all the things that I've been through in my childhood, all the things I couldn't remember, all these things and all of the verbal abuse and just different things, begin to be like flashbacks in my mind. So that led me down a path of like mental illness, really, to where I began to self-harm. I began to cut myself. But I remember being younger, having thoughts of harming myself, but never gave in to them. I could go speak it. I could go lead young people. I could minister. I could counsel. But I would go home and I had these tormenting thoughts. This was before even drug addiction. But then at the age of 20, once I gave in full blown into these drugs, then it was like all of the mental illness began to bombard me.
Yeah.
I was in and out of the psychiatric unit. By this time, I had done been to jail because of the girl that I was hanging out with. Honestly, she was underage, and I was 19. And so I went to jail for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. And then so that began more torment, more condemnation. And I went to court by myself, and the judge was just going to give me 5 days, and in between this, by this time, my mom knows, because by this time that I went to jail, I've already, put Jesus to the side, but I've also, like a few weeks after I started smoking crack, the suicidal tendencies come along. And that's what led to my arrest with getting in trouble with the younger person, was that I tried to kill myself at her house, and then the ambulance was called, and all this. And that's when my mom finds out. That's when my mom knows all of this is going on. She may have known I smoked a little bit of weed before, but not that I went to the extreme that I'm, messing with cocaine.
So depression is a stronghold now.
Oh, yeah. Sure. And I think it had been there for a while, because when I was 10, my mom had took me to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor told her I was depressed. But my mom thought, there's no way, not my child, because I was a very happy kid.
Right.
I made good grades. The only thing I got in trouble for was talking too much and doesn't pay attention. But I made good grades. I was happy-go-lucky. I was very easy at hiding.
Well, that's the key word, isn't it, right? Because you talk about, as you get into it, these things start to come up as flashbacks. It's not like they weren't there before, but it's almost an alternate reality created for you, right? So you're presenting very well, but nobody gets to see the pain behind the curtain. Is that
right?
Yeah.
And I think that also ties hand in hand when you said, even at such a young age, you learn to lie. You may not even know why you are, but you know that your answer needs to be no, that that didn't happen. If that's to protect yourself or to protect them, I don't even know if there's an answer to that. But it's that stronghold of secrets that starts really early.
Right.
And then it just carried through.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize a major podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by America's Thrift Stores, your go-to option for decluttering and giving back. You have a closet bursting at the seams or a garage that's seen better days? We've got the perfect solution for you.
That's right. America's Thrift Stores makes it easy to clear out the clutter and make a positive impact in your community. Whether you are cleaning out your wardrobe, downsizing your living space, or just looking to give back, America's Thrift Stores has you covered.
And here's the best part. You've got options. Schedule a hassle-free home pickup, drop off your items at one of their convenient donation sites, or swing by an America's Thrift Store to donate in person. No matter which way you choose, you're making a difference.
Every donation you make to America's Thrift Stores directly benefits charities in your area, such as the Home of Grace and other fantastic organizations dedicated to helping those in need.
For example, donations made to America's Thrift Stores in southern Mississippi help the Home of Grace provide support and assistance to individuals facing drug and alcohol addiction. Your contributions make a real impact on their mission to provide freedom from addiction through Christ-centered recovery. So, not only are you decluttering your life, but you're also helping build a stronger and more supportive community.
It's truly a double blessing, so what are you waiting for? Clean out that closet, clear out that garage, and make a positive difference in your community by donating to America's Thrift Stores.
Visit America's Thrift Stores online to schedule a home pickup, locate a donation site near you, or get directions to one of their store locations.
America's Thrift Stores, where giving back never goes out of style.
You know, it's interesting to me, and I'm sure as you tell your story, it'll reveal the truth of what I'm about to say, whether it's accurate or not. And but it's almost like, you talk about consciously rejecting God, and in a not subtle way, get to this place where, hey, I'm living two lives. I'm going to pick one, and you picked one, right? And close the door on Christ. But it's almost like, I see that as very merciful, right? In hindsight. And I'm curious to your intake because where it led you was to see what was being hidden, right? And that's the God of truth, right? It's the truth that will set us free. And it's almost like you had to get there for the underbelly of the darkness that you were hiding to surface, right? It's almost like that was such a merciful move. I know that some might be going, how is that mercy? But you were never going to get to a place of freedom until you were able to look at that. And you were never going to look at that as long as you had two different personalities going, right? Not in a dissociative way. But does that sound?
That's actually really good. But, breaking up with Jesus wasn't as easy as I expected it to be because, God's word says he's married to the backslider.
Yeah.
So no matter how far I ran, no matter what I did, he was still there.
Yeah, amen.
He was still, and most people say you can't hear God in a backslidden state, but I could.
Yeah.
I could still hear him. I could still feel him. He was still there. I would just push him away, or I would run to him, or, So when you said that about his mercy, I really, understood that,
Yeah, well, the beauty of God is never about how we pursue him, right? It's always about how he pursues us. That's really neat. So, all right. So where does this journey take you? I think we're just stepping off into the deep end.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in and out of this. The judge sentenced me he was going to sentence me to 5 days in court. So I didn't know nothing about court. I'm 20 years old. I didn't take my mom because I tried to hide everything from my mother. I tried to walk that straight line in front of her because all I wanted was her to be saved.
Yeah.
So all I wanted was her to go to church with me and stuff.
But you had to be fake to present that.
I had to be the light. Like I had to be Jesus or something, you know? Yeah. But, so I went to court by myself and my lawyer was like, he's just going to give you 5 days. I was like, there's no way I'm going back to that jail because I was in there for 2 days. My mom was states away and it was a lot, but so they took it to trial. I took a misdemeanor to trial because I didn't know. So they put people on the stand and made me just look like the most horriblest human being in the world, And so the judge gave me 9 months to serve in the Pike County Jail. I went to jail. I think I was in jail for 2 or 4 days. I can't remember. And they were able to get me out on an appeal bond with the promise that I would get mental help. They got me out on some kind of bond because I was mentally unstable at this point, And so I was court ordered to go to Southeast Mental Health where I had to go there and I had to tell them my story and they put me on medication, but I could only go be honest with them if I was high. I could only be honest with them if I smoke a little weed, and go in there. Because if not, I had no feelings. And then the medication they try to put me on would put my feelings in a box. But then I self-harmed as well, And I remember making a list. My self-harm had got so out of control. I carry razor blades with me to Walmart. I did that, I would keep my arms covered. I would try, I can't explain to you the grip that self-harm had on me.
Can I ask you a quick question about that? Because I love how you just talked about your emotional pieces either being in a box or not feeling. So I've heard from people who cut 2 different forms of the purpose that serves. One is to feel something. I'm not feeling anything. So I've heard some people say that. Others say to distract from the overwhelming feelings that I'm having, right? So it's almost a distraction. Are either of those true for you? Did cutting or self-harm?
For me, it was about control. It was about, and it was control and punishment to myself. And in a sense, punishment to other people, but really it was just hurting. I had I had this list and I have this journal that I still have to this day of every person that ever hurt me or I thought that had hurt me. I would hurt myself. It was something that I went through, but the first night, one night I cut too deep, I never cut myself to kill myself. It was never that intent. That one time I tried to kill myself when I was dying, I thought I was dying. I don't really want to die because I don't know what my future would have been had I died in that moment, And so I made my first trip. I took myself to the ER, because I prayed. I said, Lord, if I make it through the night, because in my mind, I was dying that night when I cut too deep. I was like, if I make it through the night, I'll go to the ER. So I went to the ER, and they made me go to Southeast Medical, which is the behavioral unit. And I was in there for a few days. And that's when the doctors would start to put labels on me of diagnoses. And then I would make it for a few more months, and I would go to because I was court ordered to go to outpatient services. And so I would go to my outpatient services. My doctor would see my arms. He was like, okay, you do this again, you're going to Cersei or type thing. Well, the one time I went, like I had cuts all over. Like I just had a moment where like, I think it was the time I was making that list, and he sent me to the hospital again. I was in there for 7 days this time, but I got MRSA as well in my arm. And it made me very sick. They thought they were going to amputate my left hand, and I am left-handed.
Yeah.
They isolated me. They put me in a room with no TV. Like I was already isolated in a sense. Like the mental hospital is worse than jail or prison. Like it was the worst, But at the same time, the doctor told me, he said, you come in here, you're encouraging, you're a leader, you lead groups, you're happy, but you go home and you self-mutilate and you use cocaine, I cannot help you. So,
when you say controlled, you mean because things, what are you saying there? Like things were so out of control, this was the one thing you could control?
I think I could control the pain. I could control the pain that I was feeling. The pain that I was feeling depended on like each cut. Like it made me channel this pain that I now feel that I've never felt. I mean, it had been there, but never to the point. Like right now, I don't have the peace of God carrying me. It almost felt like, because I'm like, Jesus, I'm done with you right now. But I believe that I did walk through that season in my life for God to show me this is what it's like without my peace. This is what it's like without my presence. And then in this season of my life, people would tell me that God's wrath had fallen upon me, that he had taken his hand off of me, all of these things. Because here I am still back and forth. Like I'm trying. And this season of self-harm, I'm not even using substances at this point for like 5 months.
Yeah.
For like 5 months. It's just something that I'm battling, and then after I had MRSA in my hand, and the third time that I went to the hospital, I didn't self-harm too much after that, because the reality that this is going to kill me, the reality that what I'm doing to myself is really bad, like physically for my health, the self-harm began to fade. But I had the suicidal thoughts, the torment of wanting to take my life because I was so hopeless and I was so lost and I was so broken because I done messed it all up. There was no way God could love me. There was no way I could ever answer the call of God in my life. Like, look at all I've done. Look at all this. Look at how I've just disgraced the grace of God. I've abused it. I've done all this, and, but I remember when God delivered me from that suicidal spirit in my early 20s, and like he is a God of deliverance.
Amen.
And I read in like the Old Testament how many times he delivered the Israelites and they went back, how many times he delivered them, they went back, and that's my story.
Yeah.
So in my 20s, God would pick me up out of my mess, get me settled, get me set, and then I would go back. I did good. I went to court. Okay, let's fast forward some. I went to court, and this time I got me a little job working at Pizza Hut. This is I just turned 21, bought that beer on my 21st birthday just because I could, but it wasn't like, this is disgusting. I never was a beer person, like you won't hear beer in my story much more after this, but at the end of that year, the judge sentenced me to a year in the county jail, suspended 30 days to serve on the weekends because I had a job. So for 12 weekends, I went to jail every weekend on a Friday and got out on a Sunday. But this was not real jail. This was a jail where I got to take in the phones. I got to take in the drugs. I got to take in the tobacco. I didn't have to dress out. Like it was a vacation.
Yeah.
From the real world.
And I bet you were everybody's favorite when you went.
Yes. I was everybody's favorite.
Now, what is this charge? This is not the contributing to a minor.
Yes, this is the same charge. I've got probation. Okay, the judge is giving me a chance after he told me I would put you in the jail, under the jail if I wasn't a man of the law type thing. Like they were very upset with me because the prosecution made it look like, oh, I'm just this great person supposed to be leading this girl, which in a sense, I was, but the addiction don't care.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not making excuses by no means.
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong, you know. And so I got on probation. Now we started hanging out, like still doing good, not using. I think that year, I think I might have smoked a little bit of weed, but I wasn't doing coke. You know, wasn't doing cocaine, smoking crack or anything like that. And then I started hanging out. Me and my best friend started dating brothers. You know, 2 brothers that were way older than us, and they were all about that street life. They were all about it, you know, and that introduced me to a world that I thought I never knew, you know, the street life. Then I got introduced to methamphetamines for the first time when I was 21, because my boyfriend's like, either we can go flip this crack or we can go flip some meth. You know, a monkey can't sell bananas. We ain't fixing to flip nothing. We're fixing to get high. You know what I mean? So that started that lifestyle, and then it started the lifestyle of stealing, you know, like, you know, starting to steal out of stores and stealing out of people's cars and stealing from my mom. Like, I would steal her debit card and take thousands of dollars out of the account. She would kick me out, threaten to call the police, but she would always let me come back. You know, so that year I was 21, and then I went to my probation officer that year, and I said, and my pastor's wife at the time went with me, and I told him, I was like, man, I'm on every drug. I need help. I don't know where to do. I don't know where to turn. And he told me, he said, well, he gave me one resource. It was a faith-based program in town. And he said, I have this, but if you don't find somewhere to go, then I'm going to send you to jail, you know. He didn't offer me any other resources. He didn't, you know, he's like, you either help yourself or, you know, you're going to go to jail. So I did go to that rehab one day, but I can't remember whatever happened from it. I think I was off back to the races, and I ran for like 2 months. At this point, I'm, you know, because mom's done kicked me out. She's super mad now because I keep taking her stuff. Which, I mean, I understand, you know, and I'm staying in a house with my boyfriend with no lights and no water. We're using the bathroom in the yard, you know, like just living a life that I was not raised up to live. Like, you know, my mom wasn't perfect by no means, but she raised me right. You know, my stepdad, they raised me right to have morals and values, even though they weren't like saved, they still were good people. I know that's, you know, but so I began. It was a few months later, they had a warrant on me, you know, the people come and got me, and I went to jail, and I begged God, I was like, God, if you just get me out of this, I'll never go back to doing drugs. I'll never do this. I'll never do that. And I went to court that day, and he said, you know, a lot of people are going to leave my courtroom, but you are not one of them. I sentenced you to the remainder of your sentence in the Pike County Jail, which was 11 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And the cell was probably about the size of this room with 8 bunks, but there would be 10 to 15 girls in this bunk. And I never went outside for like 7 months, and I stayed in that jail, you know, and to begin with, you know, some of the church people would come and they would visit, and my mom would visit some, but I don't think my mom could handle me being incarcerated like that, because to my mom, I was the hero. To my mom, I made good grades. I exceeded in school. I graduated high school with honors. I left that part out. I made it through high school.
Yeah.
You know, my mom got disabled my same year of high school, so I wasn't able to go to college on like the Pell Grant because she still made too much money, so it offset me. So here we are back to this same age before I went to jail for 11 months. I was trying to go to college. They gave me the refund money. I did relapse is what happened. But it wasn't a binge. It was like it was a small binge. It wasn't like, you know, but I always ended up doing something that ultimately led me back to jail. But in that jail, once again, it wasn't real jail. Like we had Xanax mashed potatoes, we had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches filled with methamphetamines, cigarettes coming in the tampon box, you know, money in our hamburgers, you know, phones and stuff like that, because there just wasn't much security stopping those things from coming in. So jail did not teach me the lesson that I needed to learn.
Yeah.
So I got out of jail in 2011. I did 11 months to the door. I wrote, because I already did like a month, you know, with the weekend time. And so I wrote that judge every month to let me out. He wrote me back, denied. He wrote me back. He like, denied, you know. But even in that jail, there were moments where I would try to, you know, get closer to God. And, you know, there were moments we'd have church and I'd be the speaker and stuff. There were times God was with me. You know, I still was just in the grips of this addiction.
Still playing these dual roles.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Yep. And then, so I got out. I was out for a little while. This is when Spice first come out. Mojo is what they call it now. You could buy it in the stores, you know, so I'd smoke a little bit of Mojo here and there. And then somehow my childhood best friend gets back in the picture now. And we just thought it was a good idea one day to, you know, go smoke some crack. And here we are off to the races. For months, stealing, sleeping around, doing the most, you know, anything to get high. Well, this one certain Sunday afternoon, we thought we was going to go to Kmart. And we were stealing merchandise to take to the dope man, because you could take merchandise to the dope man and get it for half off or get a little bit of substances or stuff like that. And the loss prevention people got us. So we tried to run. They asked us to go back in, and then we tried to run again. And there was a brief chase into the woods, you know. And so that day, I got charged with robbery third for stealing baby lotion.
Baby lotion?
Baby lotion and like men's hair dye, Excedrin. Like it went from theft of property to robbery in about 30 seconds, because any time you try to run from the loss prevention officers, they will make it a robbery charge. So the paper, you know, wrote us up as the baby lotion bandits and the baby lotion thieves. Yeah, this was my first felony.
Baby lotion bandit.
Yeah.
Funny, but not funny. But
Right.
yes,
You gotta laugh.
This boy, you
gotta
really laugh.
It's okay.
Yeah. If we can't laugh at ourselves, who can?
Yeah.
All right, baby lotion bandit.
So now I went to jail I'm in Houston County, which is Dothan, Alabama, and they do not play the radio. So I was
like literally.
Well, they played the Food Network on commissary day. You know, like it was awful. It was real jail. Like you had to go to bed at a certain time. You had to get up at a certain time. It was very, very strict.
This is your first experience with like real jail.
Yes.
All the other times were in Pike County.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this was the first time ever going there, and so that was real jail. I was in there for a month. And my mom, you know, finally bonded me out, and I made it. I don't know how long I made it for. I went back to using cocaine. But then I started dabbling with methamphetamines again with my cousin. But then I started being around her while methamphetamines is being cooked. And, you know, thank God I was always scared of the batteries. I've never cooked methamphetamines by myself. You know, I've never did that. But in that season of my life, I also began to use drugs intravenously. And that was a whole new world again. So that rocked on for a few months. I ended up taking a charge for that boyfriend that was still in and out of my life. He wasn't there when I went to jail for 11 months, but once I got out, he was there again type thing, you know. I took a charge for him.
Like willingly?
Yes, I willingly took a possession charge because we had been, you know, making these substances during the day. And we were on my mom's car, you know, we're trying to make money, we're hustling, you know. Once again, monkey can't sell bananas. And the drug task force got us. And because he had priors, he asked me, he said, will you please take this? I can't afford to take this charge with me. I'm ride or die. I'm going to show you I love you, you know. So I took the charge. I went to jail that night. He did not. The drug task force was like, well, if you're willing to talk, we'll make a deal with you. I was like, I'm not saying anything. And they're like, well, you sit in jail for a few days, you'll change your attitude. I went to jail that night. The next morning, they let me sign my own bond. Well, then all my little friends are freaking out, you know, because, oh, she's an informant now. She's the police, but it wasn't that. They let me go. I walked. I can't tell you how far I walked. I got away from that jail so fast because then I can't remember if it was a few weeks prior. It was a few weeks after me and that same boyfriend was in the pawn shop in Opp, Alabama, and he stole a laptop out of the pawn shop. Well, Alabama doesn't have an accessory law. And because I didn't report the crime, when Opp PD found me, I went to jail for theft of property. So
is this when you still had pending robbery?
Yes, all this is still, we're still pending. We're still pending right now. Yeah, this is 2011 was a rough year.
Yeah.
Yeah, legally. Like I couldn't get it together. So So I'm out doing the most, you know, riding around, got burners on top of the car at 5 o'clock in the morning, lost my mind. You know, the methamphetamine, I lost my whole mind. But then change of events happened, and my cousin and this boyfriend's brother, they ended up getting busted, but I was at my sister's house, but they come looking for me for questioning. Well, this time I have the pending robbery charge I'm on bond for, and now I've already got the possession charge, and I also have this theft of property charge. They come pick me up at my sister's, take me to the jail, and the sheriff is the one that questions me, and I beg him, please help me. Please. I told him, I told him what I was doing, what I was using. I said, I need help. I can't keep living like this. And he was like, well, the only way I can help you in this moment is to lock you up. And I don't want to put charges against you, any more charges, because he already knew us. And kind of, at this time, all this stuff was in different counties.
Right.
So they ain't caught up with each other.
Yeah.
So the whoever the officer was takes me back home. And I'm eating me some ramen noodles. And about 30 minutes later, he comes back. I said, man, we actually do have a warrant for your arrest. I was like, okay, I was like, I'll just bond out. He let me finish my ramen noodles, and went down to the jail. But then I seen the paperwork, and it said no bond. And highlighter, no bond, So here I am back in Houston County Jail, where my best friend is still there because she's been in so much trouble. She's not getting out at this point,
And neither are you.
No. Well, I did get out. I was in there for like 2 months, I think, and the judge court ordered me to treatment. So in 2011, I went to the Haven for the first time, which is a 28-day state certified residential program. I only went for 21 days. I don't remember the judge. I was supposed to go from jail to treatment, but the jail actually let me out by accident, but I still went 2 days later. And at that time, my eyes were open to recovery. Like, I remember the first time reading the AA book or the NA book, I was like, man, this reminds me of me. This sounds like me, And I remember going to the meetings and stuff like that, and talking to the therapist for the first time, and having a meeting with my mom for the first time, and actually being able to be honest. And this time, I don't know, I've lost time at my age. My 20s are a blur, I can only do years. So I did really well in that. I was on fire on that pink cloud, got out of treatment, did very well for 5 months, doing all the right things, going to church, serving the Lord, witnessing, going to nursing homes, praying, reading, all the good things that I was supposed to do. Then I got a job at the chicken plant, and something happened. I don't even remember at this point. They say you actually relapse before you actually do.
Yeah.
And I do remember being in a lot of pain, and I had to go to the hospital, and they gave me an opiate, and then they gave me Loratab. Well, the next day, I call up a friend, hey, let's go sell these Loratabs. Opiates were never my problem, but I was still yours to sell them.
Yeah.
Because it was good money in that lifestyle. So I was off to the races. That was in November of 2011. I remember it being around Christmas. I'm ducking off in the bathroom. My family's there trying to, smoke crack. I'm supposed to be at my sister's house wrapping presents, but I'm getting high, I'm hiding it very well from my mom. She has no idea. I went to the post office so many times during those 3 months when I really wasn't at the post office, type things. So
let me interject a quick question here, because you said they say you relapse before you relapse, right? The process of relapse starts. And my guess is that you were almost saying, I didn't see that, right?
Right.
But during this time where you're doing all the right things again, in my head, I'm just hearing somebody that she's back to the actress role, right?
Yeah.
You are. It's exactly what you're just doing. You're not actually being this person. You're just doing. Is that? So then your relapse started the minute you got out, because it never was really who you were.
I made it 5 months.
It was, right, but you made it 5 months.
Right.
You made it 5 months doing.
Oh, yeah.
Not being.
Right.
Right? And that's different, right? So doing, the doing's a little bit like white knuckling it. We can only do for so long before we give out, versus being. When it becomes a part of the being, then we know we have rest, which I'm hoping is where you're at now, right?
Definitely, yes. So, it's great you say that, because when we get to that point, that will make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So here I am spiraling out of control, so it's now January, the end of January, and my mom sent me to town to get something to eat for her. And on the way back, I was something told me, I know it's the enemy at this time, or the disease of addiction, whatever you would like to call it.
One and the same.
Right. And said, steal her money, steal her car, and go get high. I was so willing. I was spinning so bad to get high that I was willing to risk going to jail. Because then my next thought, like these thoughts are bam, bam, bam. I remember them to this day, and it'll make sense why I remember them in a minute. My next thoughts were, you can do time. If you might get a year for this, it'll be all right. I was so willing. So I went home, I dropped off the food, and I took the keys, I took the money out of the wallet, and I left. And I didn't have an ID. So I kept on trying. Went and got the drugs, and I didn't have an ID. I couldn't stay at a hotel room. So I ended up at that pastor's brother's house that was in active addiction. He thought I was there to witness. He didn't know I was there to get high,
Right.
Like he's like, I thought you were here to come pray with us. Type thing, because I lived this double life.
Yeah.
One day I was saved, and the next day I was a drug addict.
Yeah.
Like it was my life, So I was missing for 6 days. I'd never done something dumb and not come back. So my mom had to put an APB out on me. And so that's how the law got involved. And I was charged with, I had 2 felonies at the time. But by the time they caught me, and then I explained to them, like, the money wasn't enough for a felony. And then they dropped the charges to unauthorized use and this. But that violated my probation on the robbery charge. And here I am. I haven't been to jail on the possession charge yet. I haven't been to court on the possession charge. I don't even know if I've been to court on that theft of property charge, But ultimately, all of this was run concurrent, and they sent me to Houston County Jail. I was in Coffee County Jail. Like Coffee County, if you're ever going to go to jail, that was the best jail to be in. Because it was structure, it was real jail, but the COs cared about you. The people that run that jail, they cared about you. And at the time, a really good mentor of mine, that boyfriend that I first talked about, his dad that didn't like me when I was a teenager, done got saved and done got full of God, and now is done doing the prison ministry. There comes his dad.
Yeah.
So the first few years of my addiction, my mentor was this man of God that, believed in me, and he'd follow me to Walmart. I'd see him in Walmart, like when I was in backslid and stuff, I'd see him in Walmart. Then I started going to jail. He'd be coming in that jail, like God would send him to help me, But ultimately, I went to prison. I was in Tutwiler I went to prison sometime in April of that 2012. I was in prison for a month, and I worked in the kitchen, and they come and got me from the kitchen, and they took me to the shift office, and they told me, we're sorry to tell you this, but first they're like, what is your mom's name? And I told them, and the guard walked out, and he come back. He's like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your mom has passed away. So they let me talk to my sister, and they let me talk to my brother and my stepdad for like 7 minutes, and the prison was going to let me go to the funeral. I'm in shock here. Like, it's not registering what they're telling me. Like, I'm in prison, like it's hot. Like, I am not hearing what they're saying. I remember walking down in Tutwiler, and the guard is like, what is wrong with you? And I told him, he's like, you need to go to mental health right now. Like, I'm okay. I just need to go outside.
Yeah.
The prison was going to let me go to the funeral. My family was willing to pay for it, but the county come and got me for court, and the county would not let me go to the funeral. So I was in Tutwiler from April of that year until I think September, I believe, somewhere in there. And then like when my parole date had come up, because Houston County got my timesheet messed up, they had charges on me that weren't even mine, so I missed my parole date. Oh, let me back up just a little bit. A month after my mom died, my cousin, that was my mom's really close cousin that helped do her funeral, got killed in an ATV accident.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So I remember as like my cousin was going into cardiac arrest, the CO is yelling at me to get off the phone because it's time to get off the phone. But like they're telling me she's dying type thing. But so I was in prison until September. Then I went to work release. I got a job at Taco Bell. And then November rolled around, and I got on a program called SRP, which is Supervised Reentry Program. I was only out for 4 days. I had to report every week At this time, now I'm going home to a home. My sister's there. By this time, we're living there, but my mom's no longer there. I have to be an adult. I've never had to pay bills. I've never really had to worry about bills. Like, I've never had to buy my own groceries for real. Like, I ain't never had to do none of that stuff. I ain't never had to buy washing powders, like all this adult stuff. Here I am, like 24, 25. I don't know.
Well, and you didn't have a chance to actually process the loss and then go to where she was. And she's not there.
Yeah.
And so everything was different. On top of you got to be an adult.
Right.
Yeah.
I made it 4 days, started smoking weed. And at this time, some situations just begin to happen. I'm back in full-blown addiction, back and forth between crack and back and forth between meth. But I have to report every week. So every day I'm carrying around a jug of water. But I got a job. I'm working at Taco Bell, I'm carrying around water. And every time I go to report, she wouldn't test me. But some events come together. I was like, one day I went to report and there was a county mat in the highway. If it wasn't God saying, look, you're going to go back if you don't get it together, in a sense, So I got it together for a little while. I went to report and she drug tested me. And I told her, I said, there might be some weed in my system. This time I'm honest, like, you're trying to drug test me. Oh yeah, I'm ready to tell you the truth now to get out of trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was anything actually in my system. I ended up moving out of my mom's home because my mom's home was my home, but it was on my stepfather's property, which they were divorced. So there was some issues there, that were bigger than me. And it was just so much. I'm like, I'm just done.
Yeah.
By this time, I'd done sold everything out of the house. I had this big old yard sale because how I dealt with grief, let's just get rid of everything outside, out of mind. And I'm an adult. I need some money.
Yeah.
Type thing. So I ended up moving in with a church family at this time. Now I'm at another church. I'm actually back at the church I originally was at to begin with, and they're trying to help me and stuff like that. And then my best friend got out of prison. And we just thought it was a good idea to go get high. Well, the lady that I moved in with from the church that was helping me told me if I used, she wasn't going to play the radio.
Yeah.
She was going to let them send me back to prison. And that's what happened. I went back to report the next day, had a positive drug screen, and I went back to prison for 3 months to the date that I went to prison originally, the first month. And the recidivism rate of going back to prison within the first year is like 85%. And so here I am. I'm an addict. I'm a thief. I'm a liar. Now I'm a statistic. And I love Jesus. Like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
So I went to prison for 3 months. The second time was worse than the first. Got out. Did not do well, hurt some more people, like took advantage of people, all I cared about was just getting high. That was the only thing, but I was in so much torment that it was my fault that my mom died. I carried that for years, that I killed my mom, And a lady from my church and Enterprise from Refuge. I'd been part of Refuge Church off and on behind the scenes ever since I was a teenager. Like, I haven't really spoke much about them, but my pastor, Greg Atkins, I remember he was the first person that baptized me when I was 14, but I didn't go to this church at this time. It wasn't until 2013 that this is my church. I was just affiliated. And but a lady named Deborah Ford, she knew my stepfather from the past, but she had just radically got saved a year before, When she come and rescue me, she was the first person from the church world that I could be honest with. She was the first person that I could tell, I just spent the light bill money. I just got high instead of, these people that I live with, I don't have their money type thing. But she come and rescued me out of addiction. And I lived with her and her mother and her daughter for about 3 or 4 months. I can't remember, and real involved in church. So here we are, we're back in that church scene, in a spirit-full services, praying, seeking God. And in that moment, I know that those experiences, they were real. And I thought I was genuine, and I felt like I was genuine. And then I ended up going into a transition home. I got a job. I did well for almost a year, got a bicycle. Every obstacle they threw at me, I got a bicycle because they said I couldn't depend on nobody to ride, so they let me get a bike. I rode out on that bike. My helmet had little dinosaur stickers on it, and I love rocks and I love kitties because here I am. I'm 26-ish, but I'm still a little girl on the inside.
Yeah.
You know. So then the church, I signed up for the School of Ministry. Like, it's a ministry that my church back home does. And they do different things, like, you know, not teaching you how to be a minister, but teaching you the fundamentals of the Bible and get closer to God. And you go around learning your gifts and your callings and all that, you know. And I'd saved up half of the money and they let me come in, you know, and I did okay for a few months. But then the holidays hit. And it was the first holidays free without my mom. And something just happened. I started having using dreams. I've been clean for almost a year, and I started having using dreams. I was like, I'm supposed to be delivered. I'm supposed to be saved and set free. What is this? So I didn't tell nobody until I began to let that dream grow, and I began to get high. And here I am in a school of ministry, traveling in the will of God, I think, you know, not saying it wasn't the will of God, but here I am, but yet here we are back to this addiction. Same pattern, you know. And my pastor come to me one time and he asked, how was the break? Because we were on break. I was like, it was good. Well, then a few months later, some things happened. I'm exposed, you know. And he was like, Lyndsey, if you would have just told me, if you could have been honest with me, but I couldn't be honest with him because I was scared. You know, I looked up to him, he gave me a chance. You know, I didn't know how to be honest with authority in my life, like the truth, because all my life I've been dishonest. All my life I knew how to tell you what you wanted to hear, type thing, you know. So that become a new pattern in my life. So that I ran, you know, he let me stay. He didn't just kick me out. You know, he wasn't going to kick me to the streets. They knew my mom was, you know, passed and stuff. But I ran, you know, and I did things. I hurt a lot of people in that season of my life. Like, people talk about how the church hurt them. Yeah, I have some church hurt, but I hurt people in the church. Like, what do you do with that? I don't even know today I don't know what to do with that, you know, type thing. But
the fact that you hurt others?
Yes.
You don't know what to do with? Like,
I don't know just the severity of how I hurt the church. You know, most people always talk about they got hurt by the church. They got hurt by the church. No, I hurt the church. You know, I mean, I've asked God to forgive me and I've made amends where I need to make amends, but I still can't make sense of how I could do the things that I did. Other than substance use disorder, you know.
So now it's time to let that go, right? Because we say we don't know what to do with it, but sometimes we get to that point where if you've done all the work, time to let go, right? Because he'll keep that on the forefront of your mind. He'll use that as bait, the enemy, right? So when there's nothing left to do, and you said you've made amends, you've done all that stuff, you've been forgiven from the outside, forgive yourself from the inside, and let it go, right?
Right. Thank you.
Before we go any further, let's take a minute to address the man or the woman listening to today's episode and wishing for a better life. Or maybe addiction has completely overtaken a family member or a friend.
You are not alone. As you may know, the Jesus Loves Addicts podcast is produced by the Home of Grace, a Christ-centered addiction recovery program in South Mississippi with over 60 years of experience.
The Home of Grace has residential programs ranging from 30 days to 12 months. With 2 separate campuses for men and women, they are fully staffed with caring individuals who want nothing more than to guide you to a life of recovery.
Services include individual and group counseling, marriage and family counseling, classes, workshops, GED, and workforce training, all grounded in biblical principles.
And because of donations from the community, the cost of the program is incredibly affordable.
Thousands of alumni from all across the country can tell you there is no other program in the world quite like the Home of Grace.
If you want to start a new path to recovery, don't wait. Speak with their admissions specialist today. Visit homeofgrace.org or call 833-55-GRACE to talk with someone.
That's 833-55-GRACE. Call the Home of Grace today.
So bring us to 2019. Something led you.
Okay, so it was back and forth, you know, from 2000 and what year are we even in? I think we're in 2013, 2014. So 2015, 16, you know, running, moving around, you know, moving in with my sister, using my sister. 2017, I 2016, I met this guy, that I really cared about and really loved. But then I was like, Lord, I want to marry him type thing. But then God gave me what I wanted. I realized this is not it. He doesn't love you. He doesn't. So no matter where in my addiction, I could only go so far before I would be running back to the Lord, because my heart's desire, despite all of these chains, was to please God, because I had a taste of him at 13.
Yeah. I
really knew who Jesus was to an extent, so here we are, 2017, I'm back on the wagon for like 7 months, I fall off the wagon, 2018, it's a year of using another family, taking advantage of the family, taking advantage of my sister, all this, because all I cared about was when I was getting high, that's all I cared about.
Yeah.
But I would get high and I would get in my word.
That's
It's
right.
just crazy. I know it's a bad word to say, but that's how I was, because I was like one of the most hardest people to be around, because I had so much truth on the inside, but then I had so much junk.
Yeah.
So much junk, and it was just a tornado. I was a tornado, for years. And then, so at the end of 2018, I was in psychosis so bad from my conscience, from the things that I'd done, from the drugs, from just the situations going on around me. I remember being at my sister's house, and my church, Refuge, has a camp meeting. And this was the end of 2018. It's New Year's Day. I was like, man, just take me to the church. They're all dressed. There is camp meeting. It's revival. It's the end of the year. Everybody's dressed nice in their fancy clothes and their hair did. And I come in there like a wild woman out of a cave. But I knew at the end of the day that was my only hope. I didn't know, but I knew that worked. That worked. And they had to come get me out the car, scared to death. But Deborah Ford and Sister Becky Atkins, they met me at the door and they took me to the altar. I don't remember much of that night. I know there's a lot of music going on. I don't know how long we were in the altar. I don't remember. And I remember then Dee dies. She's like, you can't go back where you were at. By the time service is over, I'm still scared to death. I'm so petrified, because at this point, I believe the law is so done with me and the church is so done with me that they have come up with something to get rid of me completely, like to kill me. That's how bad the psychosis was. Yeah. But Dee, like, we stayed at the church that night, her and her kids, and she decided to keep me close. For 42 days, she kept me close at her house. And she had taken someone to the Home of Grace for Women in 8 Mile about 2 weeks before this. And she believed in her heart that this was where I was supposed to go. I didn't even believe it was a real place to begin with. I was like, there's going to be sumo wrestlers there. Y'all just trying to kill me. It wasn't until I heard on the phone Mary Tillman's voice that this is real. This is a real place. The first time she talked to me. And I remember asking her, I was like, well, am I going to be able to work? And she's like, no, honey, you're not going to work here. But they told my family that I had to have half of the money. I didn't have no money. You know what I mean? I might have had I had a little bit of money, but not no money like that, And, but Dee was like, I'm just believing God. I'm believing him that this is where you're supposed to go. People would try to call her and tell her, well, there's this free rehab she can go to. She can go here. She can go there. But Dee stood her ground and let me live in her home. I was in psychosis for 30 days after I stopped using. But I remember the night that psychosis lifted off of me. I remember being in a worship service, and I can't explain to you, but it was like a cloud just gone. And my eyes finally opened. They just finally opened, And I think it was 11 days later, I went to the Home of Grace. And when I got to the Home of Grace, I no longer had to be anything. I no longer had to do. I no longer had to play a part. I no longer had to be Sister Lyndsey. I no longer had to be a minister. I no longer had to be a leader. I no longer had to be a drug addict, a thief. I no longer had to be anything. It was like a fresh start. And then I met the love of God and just the simplicity of the gospel. Like, finally it clicked. There's nothing that I can do to earn his love. There's nothing I can do to earn his grace. Like, it finally clicked that what Jesus did on the cross was enough for me. It was enough. And that's when this process of being able to heal, being able to grow, being able to be an adult, being able to get closer to God, not with any hidden agendas, not with any motives, not with anything that I was going to win something or lose something in the end. It was because finally God really does love me, and I really do love him. And he really does have a purpose for my life. He really does love me, and ever since the Home of Grace, like I got healing from the trauma. Like my healing was very fast. They had a class called Survivors, and the healing that I got from that class was very fast, and then I went to the grad dorm. I began to work at Rouse's. I started out as a little cook. Rouse's was the first place to give me an opportunity, knowing where I come from. I was the baby lotion bandit, without the Home of Grace. Yeah. And it was hard work.
Yeah.
But Rouse's was the first job I never quit when I wanted to quit, when it was hard. Rouse's taught me work ethic. Yeah. Rouse's taught me integrity. Rouse's taught me how to do the right thing when nobody else was looking, and to take pride in my job. Yeah. And I lived at the grad dorm for about 8 months. But, when you go to rehab, you gain some weight. I gained a whole body at
She did. She said I look like I ate a client, and I've never forgotten that.
Well, let me ask you a quick, and I'm so sorry we have to bring this into a landing, but I'm mesmerized by your story and literally could listen to every detail, and I'm sorry that we're going to miss some of it, but that was what year then? Like, how long have you been sober now?
Since 2019.
Since 2019.
And then in 2023, I become a peer support specialist with people engaged in recovery, and that's what I've been doing ever since. I help people that are involved in the legal system find their pathway to recovery. I work with lawyers, attorneys, social workers, DRCs, probation officers, and help those people that everybody else has given up on, or they burned their bridges. Yeah. So.
Wow. Beauty from ashes again, right? It becomes a common theme. And here you are giving back. And, as I listen to your story, and maybe somebody out there, as they listen to your story, the one word that kept going through my mind was emotional exhaustion, right? I mean, because you were literally two people, right? Playing these both sides of the fence. But again, you were a human doing, not a human being, right? And so there was always this energy going out and having to perform for somebody, either perform for the worst people in your life or perform for the best people in your life. And I just kept thinking, my heart went out. I was just like, oh, that just had to be exhausting. And so it's really kind of a great way to end this episode on what you just said. When you got there, you didn't have to do anything. You found out that you couldn't earn it anyway, right? And that's not the beauty of it, right? Again, it's the beauty of it is how he pursues us, not how we pursue him.
Right.
And what an exclamation mark on a fascinating and really, powerful story. And again, what I hope you get from these as we talk about this is just, again, I know I say this all the time, and maybe I will intentionally end with it every time. There's no place dark enough that God's light can't shine a path for you out. And that is the truth. And boy, your story really highlights that beauty. And thank you so much. And if you have a story like this that you want to share, it's helping others. People are finding hope in hearing this, hearing where people went. You know what? You mentioned it. You said you read the big book and the NA book, I think you mentioned.
Yourself. Right.
Yeah, and started to see these stories, because if we don't understand that there have been people here who have escaped it, sometimes we feel there's no escape for us. I want to promise you, I want to guarantee you there is an escape route, but you have to choose it, right? There's no guarantee that you'll get on it. That's a choice you have to make. The guarantee is that it's there. It's before you. If you want to choose it, I promise you it's there. He's waiting, and we're waiting. We love you. JesusLovesAddicts.com. Until next week, thanks so much.